Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Red and White Authority, episode number 22. I'm Art Regner, along with USA Today's Hockey Hall of Fame writer Kevin Allen, and we're talking about what unfortunately is the end of the Red Wings season as they lose Game 7 to the Tampa Bay Lightning in Tampa by a score of 2-0. A much closer game, I think, considering what the Red Wings were facing. Two of their top six defensemen, Nicholas Cromwell, was out because obviously of the one-game suspension that we talked at length in the last program, and also Marek Zizlicki, who suffered a concussion, which was, I believe, early in the first period of Game 6, where he was hit 3 times by Brendan Morrow, or a number of Tampa Bay Lightning players on the same play, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And they showed it last night on the Red Wing telecast. And Zidlicki did not have a real good game in Game 6, and now everyone figures it was because he was concussed. But with all that said, let's get right into the game. Kevin Marchenko came in. Jakub Kindl came in. They played very, very well for the most part. I think if you got the tenor coming out of the Red Wing room from the players and Coach Mike Babcock is that, hey, we did everything but score. I mean, we played a very, very good game. We outshot them 31-17. Yet I still, even though Ben Bishop played his best game, and he got a shutout and he made some big saves, it just seemed that the Red Wings didn't have any puck luck, not really sustained pressure. I mean, they had 31 shots on net, but to me it seemed like it was a quiet 31 shots on net. During this whole series, I never saw the Red Wings get into any kind of rhythm or cycle in the offensive zone, and I think, unfortunately, even though they played well last night, and maybe they deserved a better fate, I think they believe they deserved a better fate, they just, what's plagued this team the last several playoff runs, when they really need to score goals, they just don't get it done.
Well, I would agree with that assessment. I think if you watch that game, you have to conclude that the loss of Cromwell, which seemed like it was going to be significant, they were able to overcome. And Zidlicki. I mean, I thought both Kindl and Marchenko both did everything they could. That game was not lost because of defensive play. The Red Wings did a really good job against a very dynamic offensive team. They kept Tyler Johnson away from the net. Certainly the Lightning had some prime scoring chances, but Mrazek, was very good. And as they said after the game, they played well enough to win a Game 7 on the road, but they lost to a very good team who found a way, to get a big goal at the right time. And I think that was, it was a 1-0 game essentially. And those games really come down to who get the right bounce, who's in the right place at the right time. And Ben Bishop, who was below average to average in the first 6 games, stepped up and made the saves he had to make. It was a very solid performance. Although I agree. I think it was a very soft and quiet 31-shot performance. Like, they never really had those. They had a couple of grade A chances, as Mickey Redmond would call them, but they didn't have those, the bang chances with the second rebound, or the pass across the crease like they've had in previously in the series. But all in all, I think if you're the Red Wing brass, you're not happy about getting ousted in the first round, but you're pretty pleased with the way you played against what I consider to be a superior opponent. The Lightning, to me, in fact, I just wrote a piece that I posted on USA Today. They're listed at 12-2 in the odds, 6-1 essentially. Maybe it was 6-1. They were on, and it was down. They were down obviously because the Rangers and the Chicago Blackhawks, they have odds. And when I look at that team, the Lightning now are 6-1-1 in the regular season against all the teams that are left in the West. They are 3-0 against the Rangers, 5-0 against the Montreal Canadiens. Like, they're in a position to make a run for the Cup. They really are. I mean, it's a mobile defense, a quality offense. At some point, Stamkos is going to break out. History says he'll do that. He's been a very consistent, goal scorer. I like their chances to move on and maybe even to get to the final. I didn't pick them. I picked the Rangers. I picked the Lightning at the beginning of the season, but I liked the way the Rangers were playing at the end of the regular season. But when you compare, the difference in the series in hindsight was 5-on-5 play. The Lightning were the best 5-on-5 team statistically in the first round. And the Red Wings just couldn't score 5-on-5. And as you mentioned, that's been a problem in recent years in the postseason. Their power play, when they were able to score on the power play, and they couldn't get it done last night. So, all in all, I think it was a good performance by a Red Wing team against a Tampa Bay team that should have beat them and did.
Well, I actually agree with that. I'm not going to sit here because I usually don't pat myself on the back, but I did say Tampa was going to win this in 7. And, as the game wore on, I never got a feeling last night that the Red Wings, even though they were outplaying them, and this just sounds weird, outplaying a team but being in control of the game, to me, are two different things. And I never felt that the Red Wings were in control of that hockey game last night. Not that Tampa was either, but it just was I had an eerie feeling throughout that game. And the fact of the matter is I think that at that point, when you get into a game like that, as much as Thomas Tatar, and let's be honest, besides Pavel Datsyuk and Tatar were their two best forwards. Glendening and Miller, they did what they did. They're excellent too. But I'm talking about pure offensive capability. Datsyuk and Tatar lived up to it. Nyquist, he's got to learn, I think, when to shoot and when to not start dipsy-doodling all the time, but that'll come with experience. And then, of course, Henrik Zetterberg. So, Kevin, I guess before we get into individual players and what the Red Wings are going to do and Mike Babcock's future and maybe preview some of the series that begin tonight, do you agree with that? I watched. They were the better team, perhaps, but they never seemed to be in control of the game.
Yeah, it didn't, even though when they were 2-1 on shots, it didn't feel like, they were winning. Sometimes when you have more shots on goal, even if you haven't scored yet, it feels like you're winning because you've just been so dominant, and you could see the other team is scrambling. Like the Lightning, despite being outshot, never were scrambling. They didn't have sustained pressure. It was a lot of one and dones on the shots. Bishop never looked like he was in panic mode. The defense never was in a panic. I thought the Red Wings were pressed a little bit more than the Lightning were. Even though they didn't have as many shots, there were some pretty anxious moments for Red Wing fans who were watching that, because there were some scrambles in front of the Detroit net. One of the issues when you analyze these playoff series is oftentimes it's hard to give credit to the other team, and this Lightning team is a really dangerous team, to play the way they did without getting anything out of Stamkos, I think really just shows how strong they really are. Stamkos is over the last 7 or 8 years is one of the after Ovechkin is probably the most consistent goal scorer in the NHL. And he got nothing in the series, and yet, the Lightning were still a far better 5-on-5 team. So, this Lightning team is a good team. Like Stralman on defense, I think everybody understands now why, Yzerman wanted him badly. I think, Boyle, for a role player, is a very significant player for this team, and it's not a accident that he's played more than 50 playoff games over the last 3 seasons. That's when he is a big factor. He's a big guy. He can win face-offs. The Lightning were very good on face-offs in this series. The Red Wings were better yesterday, but it's all the little things. So I think both teams had to be pleased with the way they played when it mattered. I'm sure the Lightning felt like they never really got it going until the last 2 games. But that's all that matters. Nobody asked how many games you win is, did you win the series?
Right, and I thought that Mike Babcock, and we'll get into this a little bit later. I think that you could tell that he was greatly disappointed, and I was reading body language. I don't know if he was, obviously he was disappointed that they lost, but it almost seemed that he was disappointed because he was, it almost looked like he was kind of knew that that might be the last time that he's behind the Wings bench as a coach. But we'll get into that. Let's get into some players and what's next for the Red Wings. And it's odd. Stamkos, the captain, doesn't score a goal for the Lightning. Zetterberg, the captain for the Red Wings, doesn't score a goal for the Red Wings. Both of them had 3 assists in the entire series, and I believe that their statistics, at least point-wise, that was it. Last night, Henrik Zetterberg stepped up and said, hey, we just didn't score goals, and I take it upon myself. If you get as much ice time as I get, you have to score goals, which is, those that know Henrik Zetterberg, or Z as he's called, know that that's who he is. I mean, he's going to, and that's why they love him, and that's why he's a captain. And, he does a lot of good things. Unfortunately, in a playoff series, even though he is doing a lot of good things, one of the things he has to do is score, or at least be setting up a lot and get more than 3 assists in a 7-game series. A lot of speculation that either Z was hurt, he said he wasn't, Father Time has caught up with him, or maybe it's just one of those things, because Mike Babcock went out of his way, which was really kind of odd in his post-game press conferences to say, or his post-game press conference, pardon me, to say, look, our best players are like 34, 37, 38, or, he's throwing off all these numbers, and then he said, and, Pav, I don't think he's going anywhere soon, but how are we going to replace him? And I'm thinking, well, geez, maybe Dylan Larkin, I'm not sure, I mean, it seems that you have a core of people. I mean, I just thought it was kind of odd. So in this long kind of soliloquy that I'm going to do, Kevin, let's first talk about Zetterberg. Do you think it is Father Time? Is it just a blip on the radar screen, in that a guy that is as disciplined and understands the game and as talented as Henrik Zetterberg will rebound very, very nicely next season?
Well, I don't think he's done, but I do think that Father Time has made him less of an offensive threat than he's been in the past. He still plays at a high level, a high compete level. I talked to you, and I think it was the last Red and White Authority where I talked about the other, GMs that I've spoken to about Zetterberg, who, would gladly, take him on their team, and just wondering where, the comment is that doesn't everyone in Detroit realize how hard it is to score a goal in the playoffs? And yeah, everybody does realize, but it's clear when you watch him regularly, like we do, that he's not the same player. And just offensively, like he's still gritty, he's still around, he's still engaged. But last night, remember on the break-in, it was probably the best passing combination of the night. I think it was Nyquist that passed it over to Zetterberg as he was cruising in on the left wing, and he put it in Bishop's pads, or at least in his midriff. And the old Z probably would have buried that shot. Would have found So what is it? Is it just a split second of timing it's off? I don't know. But I don't think for a minute that he's done. I think he'll come back and have another strong season. But I just don't know that you can count on him to be the offensive flag carrier. Maybe I'm wrong, but this season it appeared that he struggled more to produce offensively than he has in the past, even though he was still a pretty valuable player. His passing is still sharp. He's still a playmaker. To me, it's just in the goal-scoring aspect of it.
Well, I think that play that you're talking about, I mean, he broke in and he did a shot. Usually, Z at that point shoots a laser beam and picks a corner, an upper corner or something. He finds the part of the net that's open, and you're right. That just seemed to be a very soft shot right into the midriff or the pad area of Ben Bishop, and I think that was maybe the basic problem. Except for a few of the Red Wings shooters, it seemed like everybody was just shooting right at Bishop. I mean, and he saw everything. So I don't know. I mean, and it's easy to criticize and second guess at this point, but. Let's look at what the Red Wings thought they were going to have in this playoff series from their forward core and what they really did end up getting. You had a Justin Abdicator who was shaking hands with his left hand in the line last night, so that his right hand was messed up. Eric Cole, who was brought in to, screen Ben Bishop, and, obviously that didn't happen. Johan Franzen, who has been out for almost all of 2 years now, it seems like, with concussion issues, and no one knows what his future is. Henrik Zetterberg, who is, as you said, Father Time is catching up with him. And you look at, Pavel Datsyuk, whom is a great player, but I think Father Time's caught up with him a little bit too, because he kind of drifts in and out. And obviously, Tampa Bay was keen on Datsyuk too, to try to hit him or try to throw him off his game. But, Datsyuk is a tremendous player. I mean, if I walked away from this series saying that I don't care, Mike Babcock, if he's 37 or 38, this guy still has it. I mean, he's still, and I think Babcock was alluding to it too, said I don't think he's going anywhere, but who's going to replace him? But with all that said, if you look at what the Red Wings thought they were going to have in this series to what they had, especially forward-wise, I think it's very, very difficult to count on still young players still finding their way, who played, I thought, as well as they could play. I'm not really worried about their lack of scoring or consistency or anything like that, but I think, the Red Wings have hung their hat on, years ago it was, Fedorov and Yzerman up the middle, and, they always seemed to, then Datsyuk and Zetterberg kind of took over. They always had that combination, and when that combination now is aging, I think Mike Babcock asked a really good question from the standpoint of, and maybe this is why he may not come back, is that, look, I think it was pretty apparent in this series. We tried to shore up our forward core. It didn't happen. Franzen was injured. Eric Cole, unfortunately, was injured. His career may never be the same. Glendening was, we lost him for 6 minutes, and we might have lost a series in that 6 minutes, in Game 4 when he was gone. So I guess my point trying to be is that how critical is it right now for the Red Wings, where it appears they may have some guys coming up replacing Datsyuk and Zetterberg, and the Red Wings are the first to tell you that, hey, we were lucky, that we had Datsyuk and Zetterberg, where we drafted these guys, that they were such great players. A transition period, do you think that the Red Wings this offseason really have to look at it and say, hey, we love Pav and we love Z, but we've got to really kind of tinker around here and try to get that next generation of Red Wings, elite level Red Wings, on the schneid, even if we have to take a step back?
Yeah, I know that's been debated within the organization of whether they have to take a step back. I'm not so sure they do, and I say that because I think Dylan Larkin will be in the lineup by the end of next season. That's my take on it. I don't think they're pressuring him to leave Michigan, but there's a lot of people that think Dylan Larkin is pretty close to being ready now. He's obviously not going to have the impact of a veteran player, but he could step in and contribute and sort of learn on the job. To me, if he could get in there while Pavel Datsyuk is still there, he can learn by him. The one thing that makes Larkin unique is, and I just spoke to Todd Richards, the Columbus Blue Jackets coach, who's now coaching Larkin on the U.S. national team. He's over there competing with NHL players against, rosters that are filled with NHL players. So he's getting really NHL experience over there. And he made the comment that what's impressed him the most about Larkin is not his offensive flair, and he's got plenty of that, but the fact that he's a 200-foot player. He's a young man, and he already plays, very defensive-minded. He's mindful of his responsibility. So, he's like Datsyuk and Zetterberg, who came over here, understanding there were two sides of the game. So, I think next season Larkin will be there, and I wouldn't be shocked in 2 seasons if Larkin is not the #1 center on the Detroit Red Wings. And I think Mantha is going to take another year in Grand Rapids, but I think by the end of next season in the playoffs he'll be up as well. And I think that's a little less certain than Larkin. I think Larkin is projected to be a can't miss potential star player, and I think Mantha, there's a lot of potential there to be a scorer, but they're still not quite sure where he's going to be. If he reaches his potential, they could have a big time scorer there. So, I think the Red Wings, with those two players and with some of the other players they have, still have a lot of potential to be able to maybe sort of do this on the fly. I don't think the Red Wings are close to where they've got to pull a Buffalo Sabres or a, Arizona Coyotes and hit the reset button. There's still a lot here. I mean, Tatar and Nyquist are quality players. Sheehan, we can debate whether he's a number 2 center or a 3 center. I mean, I think that's a fair debate. But he's a quality hockey player. We know that. We know Glendening is going to help this team for a number of years. We see potential in a lot of other players as well. DeKeyser is going to be a contributor for a number of years. So I think the Red Wings have the ability to kind of maintain this existence they have now, but I think they're going to have to supplement it through the free agent marketplace. I think that's the key.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and the reason I'm asking that is that obviously when the emotions are running high on Twitter and all that, last night Red Wing fan base seems to be, and it's really difficult. Not that I'm like the Gallup organization here. I'm trying to take a poll of emotional fans on social media. But it does appear that people are saying, look, we need a cataclysmic upheaval of something here. Whether we make a big trade, we try to acquire a free agent, or we just say, and this was pretty interesting. People were saying, look, Babcock, this team hasn't advanced out of the second round since 2009, so maybe it's his message, as great a coach as he is and as a motivator, maybe they both Babcock and the Red Wing organization come to the fact is, hey, the old, what Lou Holtz said or Chuck Daly, after about 10 years, it's time to move on because your message is stale, regardless if you're changing your roster or not. So I know you said they could do it on the fly, but can they do it on the fly without at least making at least 1 or 2 significant changes? I'm not saying tear the team down, because it does look like you have a foundation, but that they need to, quote-unquote, shake things up a bit.
Oh, I think for sure. Like, you have to make an effort to strengthen the defense and to get a real puck-moving defenseman. Cronwell's a exceptional defenseman, but he's not the supreme puck mover that a lot of the other teams have. So, if you brought a Mike Green in, he would obviously add a little zest to the offense. If you, I wish I don't have my duck yet, but if I did, a Dion Phaneuf would give the defense more bite if they could, make a trade. So I understand what fans are saying. Like I think they do need to freshen it up a little bit. Absolutely. And I think they know that. So I would assume that they'll be in and trying to make some moves that I think will shake it up. I mean, they're not going to come back with the same old group. I don't think that for a minute. I do believe that we're going to see Marchenko up here for the full season. I think Sproul's on the horizon. I think they feel it's time to give him a look. Polkinen, I got to believe they're going to give him an opportunity. Maybe Yurko gets moved this summer. They'll create some roster space. I wonder if Landon Ferraro hasn't played his way onto the team. I thought he was quite noticeable in this series and as a role player. And a lot of times changing up the role players can also change the look of a team. And Ferraro offers a little bit of offensive flair to that fourth line. So I would suspect that we are going to see some changes, particularly on the back end. And I wouldn't, I'm pretty confident they'll be looking around trying to find a scorer as well.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess I would look at it. You're looking at a fourth line perhaps next year, because I was going to ask you about Landon Ferraro a little bit later in the show, but let's go right for it. I mean, a fourth line of Glendening, Miller, and Ferraro?
Yeah. That's what I think you will be looking at. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't do that, because what I like about Ferraro is that he has scored in his past, much like Glendening has. And that doesn't mean those guys are going to be 20-goal scorers, but what it means is hey, look, in addition to serving as checkers and playing penalty kill and being involved in preventing the other team from scoring, when they're on the line, they're an offensive threat. You look at the New York Islanders, fourth line with Martin and Clutterbuck. Those guys can score, and I think that's what the Red Wings do. You need to get scoring up and down your lines, and I just was impressed by Ferraro. I thought he fit in real well, and really he wasn't on anybody's radar, at least the fans, for much of the season. Everybody knew he was having a good season, but it wasn't like everybody said, well, at the end of the season, Ferraro will be up for sure.
Right, they didn't protect him. I mean, he was pretty much able to go and sign with whomever he wanted, and the Red Wings signed him then to a one-year deal. Certainly. I can remember when he was drafted. He was projected to go in the first round. I don't know if he had injury issues or something his draft year or not. And the Red Wings actually traded down into the second round, and he was like the second or third pick of the second round, but he was the Red Wings quote unquote first round draft choice. Like Johan Franzen was the Red Wings. Some people say, well, he was their first pick. Yeah, he was their first pick, but they didn't have a pick in the first or second round. He was actually picked in the third round, Johan Franzen, So, yeah. I mean, if so, I guess my point being is then let's look at the forward core right now. And, I would, under the assumption that Erik Cole, his career could be over, and, and I hope to God it's not for his sake. If he wants to play, the guy's been through he's really been through Hades and back, during his career. But I would expect that he probably will not be back with the Detroit Red Wings. Jurco, I think, is a prime candidate to be traded. He has size and he has skill, so he probably would be. But I guess the real wild card in all of this, or actually there's two, what do they do with Stephen Weiss? Do they try to move him or hope that he plays his way into what the player he was with the Florida Panthers? And, of course, Johan Franzen. What happens to Johan Franzen, whom Red Wing fans have been calling for? Do something, buy him out. The mule isn't the mule anymore. So I mean, I think that those are. Let's go with those four forwards and see what you think's going to happen.
Well, I don't think they need to do anything with Johan Franzen because he's on long-term IR. Like if he doesn't play, there's no cap damage. Right. So like what does it matter to the fans what they do with him? They had cap relief from him because he was obviously gone more than 10 games in a row. So that's just an unfortunate situation. Concussions, we've seen that with some pretty prominent people. Most notable Michigan native Pat LaFontaine. It's a problem that's one doctor told me, and I thought this was the best way to describe it. It's the last frontier of medicine, where it's still. They're making strides in understanding it, but they still don't fully understand why some people react differently to concussions than others, and that multiple concussions seem to change the situation exponentially. That it's not twice as bad, but it's can be as 10 times as bad. Why does a guy like Sidney Crosby is he able to be gone for almost 2 seasons and then come back and not have any issues, while others continue to have issues forever? I mean, the USA Hockey medical officer, Dr. Michael Stewart, who's of the Mayo Clinic, who I've gotten to know, I thought he summed it up best when I asked him what does he tell people who have a concussion. He says, well, I tell them they will be back somewhere between 2 weeks and never. And he says that's the only way you can describe it because it's so very difficult. So Johan Franzen, I don't think they need to do anything. They just have to wait and see. Now, Johan Franzen says he hopes to come back. Well, I hope he does. And, there is some precedent for this happening. A guy sitting in Pittsburgh that nobody in Detroit likes has been able to do that. Now, with regard to Stephen Weiss, I think before you answer that question, you got to say what you're going to do with Mike Babcock. Is he coming back or not? If Mike Babcock was coming back, I think you got to do everything in your power to move him off the roster because, Babcock just doesn't have any faith in him. And Stephen Weiss came in and he just wasn't right physically. He wasn't fully recovered, and he's never been able to, regain the trust of the Red Wing coaching staff. So whether it's a buyout and spread the hit over the next 2 years, I think he's got 2 years left, or they spread it over 4 years. I don't know. Would somebody take him? I think it's possible that you could trade him if you took some of the money, a little bit of the money. But then it starts to get in that border area, because you can spread the cap hit over twice the number of years. So if that's the case, then taking back too much money becomes counterproductive, and you might as well just buy him out. So I think that's a decision that needs to be made. But if Babcock is coming back, then why bring Weiss back? Because he obviously doesn't trust him. And I think. Who was the other guy? Yurko, I think.
Well, Yurko, as far as maybe if they're going to move someone off their roster or make it part of, Red Wing fans are hoping. I'm not sure. I'm trying to piece it together in my mind. What kind of blockbuster trade they could actually make? And who would they be willing to part off? At one time, obviously the more irrational fans were saying, well, maybe it's time to move Datsyuk or Zetterberg and do something very big and very major. But I think if they were to quote unquote trade a major player off their roster, I would imagine it would have to be Jimmy Howard. But that's just me assuming that.
Yeah, and trading goaltenders often just comes down to opportunity. We'd have to look around the league, but right now what we can identify is Buffalo, and that seems like a real logical spot for Howard, because he is from New York.
Right, upstate New York too, right.
Right. So that seems that, but we don't really have any idea how Tim Murray feels about Howard. San Jose will be looking for a goalie as well. So perhaps that's a possibility. I think that seems realistic to me too, that you'd at least consider moving Howard, because I think Mrazek has shown that he has the ability to be a top goalie in the NHL. There's no doubt how he performed, and it seemed like, this is the key part, I think. It seemed like he learned from his mistakes. When he had trouble down the stretch with his consistency, and Babcock said what he did, we were saying, well, a couple of times, well, how's he going to be? Because he was good last time. Does that mean he's going to be bad this time? Well, he wasn't. He didn't have the bad games. He developed some consistency. All goalies are going to give up bad goals. That's just part of the position. But you have to minimize those and mitigate the time. So I think the Red Wings have some pieces that people would like to get. I think Yurko still has some attraction as a young player. I mean, certainly he would fit into rebuilding team like Buffalo, or into a team trying to find some offense and more size and speed in Florida. Arizona needs forwards. There are a lot of places. They could consider trading Polkinen too. And I know there's a lot of teams that are interested in Sproul, the Grand Rapids defenseman, so you could make him part of the package if you didn't feel he was going to break into the NHL next season. So, the Red Wings have some options, and I think they do it. I mean, if they were, I don't think they really even would consider trading Zetterberg or Datsyuk. I mean, that, and there hasn't been a trade like that with the Red Wings since, maybe Danny Gare and Dale McCourt and Mike Foligno. That trade.
I was going to say Norm Allman and Paul Henderson.
Yeah, that Dale McCourt Foligno deal, right, was a pretty big move. But I just don't see it. I mean, I just can't. I've been around the game too long. I just can't see trading Zetterberg. I'm kind of an old school guy. I understand the frustration with his lack of scoring down the stretch. I get it. But I just think there's just so much value to him, and the leadership is so important, in the chemistry. He's a pretty popular leader, as you know, Art. And,
right.
The guys like him. I think what you do instead of trade him is you just start to understand and account for the fact that he's not going to be able to lead you offensively, and you got to develop other scorers. And we saw, like, Abdicator became a scorer this season. Was he just hot, or is that what he's going to really do? I think we got to sort of sort that out a little bit. But I think they do have some players that are coming that are going to help.
Well, let's quickly touch upon Eric Cole. I mean, the way it sounded, the initial medical reports, and we haven't really had an update in quite a while now, that quite possibly and unfortunately, as I said, the guy's been through a lot, and we wish him nothing but the best. This could be it for him.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. You never know. Like that's been predicted in the past, and he's come back as well. I think he likes to play, and he's a really good guy, real fine guy, and everybody likes him in the room. And I know in the media we love him because he's just interesting to talk to, introspective, willing to sort of analyze what's happening. So he's popular with the media as well. But if I'm the Red Wings, it's time to move on from the Coles and the Zedlickis of the world. And if you're going to rebuild this team a little bit on the fly, I think you got to leave room for these younger players to come up and get accustomed to playing in the NHL. Whenever you have older players on the roster, there's just not room for those younger players to come up. I mean, Pulkkinen is a lot older than a lot of young prospects because he's never really had the opportunity to come up and play for an extended period, and they got to play him next year or they'll lose him.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Ken Holland has said, has told, I'm sure both of us many times, we have to see where he's at because we're not going to lose him for nothing. It's not going to be like a Nestrasil whom, I guess the Red Wings weren't all that, put out when he was claimed by Carolina off of waivers, but they're definitely not going to do that for Pulkkinen. Either he's on the roster or they're going to trade him. So let's quickly then look at the defensive core. We talked about Mike Green. I think that's somebody that the Red Wings have coveted for a while, and and obviously Dion Phaneuf wants to be a Red Wing. If you read the tea leaves in Toronto, but let me ask you: is it conceivable through free agency that they acquire Mike Green? And I don't know where his status is in Washington. He's a long-time cap, and they could do something this playoff run. They could be one of those surprise teams that really no one thought was going to do anything, and boom, my gosh, the Washington Capitals finally have lived up to their expectations. Much like the Red Wings, they kind of remind me of after the Red Wings were eliminated by Colorado, who won the Cup in '96. Detroit was then labeled basically the best team that's never going to win anything, and then they win back-to-back cups, and they finally got their act together. So. Washington's an interesting team, so acquiring Mike Green through free agency and then through some sort of trade, and maybe they trade contracts and try to get some sort of relief. Or I know Steve Spott isn't in Toronto anymore, but he's the uncle of Stephen Weiss, trying to work out a deal that way. Again, I don't see Toronto trading Dion Phaneuf to Detroit. Straight up. I just don't see it, unless financially it makes sense, I guess. I see that being much like the Kyle Quincy deal a few years back. 3 teams involved, meaning the team that eventually trades Phaneuf to Detroit is not the Toronto Maple Leafs. But let's look at the defense, that case scenario, because it seems like they have a lot of young defensemen that are on the cusp of really making at least making the NHL roster or NHL talents. With that said, how do you see the defensive core playing off? And again, Kevin, I know I'm rambling here, but let's look at it that way. I mean, Green through free agency, Phaneuf through trade, possibility, one of two, both of them, or neither of them?
Well, I would say and this is just guesswork on my part, but I would think that Green is more realistic, because Green. Look, they've got a lot of mobile defensemen in Washington now. So Green is not the man anymore, and he's made a lot of money. He just wants to play for a good team. If he sees Detroit as being a good team, he can come here and be the man. He can be the point on the power play. He can be a guy that can be an important offensive defenseman on this team. They don't have anybody like him. Right. And in Washington they've got Carlson and Niskanen who can do that. So they don't really run the same kind of puck possession that the Red Wings do. And whether it's Babcock or someone else, I got to believe they're going to maintain this long history they have of being a puck possession team. So I would think that Green is more realistic. They'll just be in there recruiting along with everyone else. The problem is there are other teams looking for, point men on the power play. So there'll be, be a recruiting battle. And, I don't have any idea how Green feels about, living in Detroit. Dion Phaneuf, I think the difficulty on a trade like that is the Maple Leafs are not viewing this as take the salary off us, and I think that's what teams around the league want the Maple Leafs to do. And they're viewing it as, hey, I got an important asset here, and I want to be compensated for that. And the Red Wings are not going to give the Maple Leafs a premium member of their team to get Dion Phaneuf. I just don't see that happening. So, whether or not they could make a deal, I don't know. Would they be interested in getting a guy like Sproul, or do they like Pulkkinen as a potential player? First round pick. I mean, what are we talking about? I don't think the market has been established for Dion Phaneuf. So I think a lot would depend on what the asking price will be. But I don't see the Red Wings participating in that if it's he's a crucial player on our team. I want a crucial player off your team. I don't think they think that would move them ahead. So on the defense, I think they like obviously Cronwell and Eriksson are going to be set, despite the fact that you have some reservations about Eriksson. I think they'll still keep him. I don't know that the Red and White authorities feeling about Eriksson will play a role, but yeah, I could be wrong.
I think you're right.
But DeKeyser is I think now looks like he's going to be a very good second pairing defenseman. I think around the league, the feeling about him is he's maybe not quite as good as the Red Wings believe he is. I think he's a real solid player, and I think he's better offensively. He's just starting to explore that side of him.
Right.
I don't think he's ever really considered himself as an offensive defenseman, and I think he has some ability there that he's just sort of now exploring. And Quincy, I think ultimately he's going to end up as the old war horse of this defense, just a guy that's out there every day, gets the job done, not flashy. I know some fans don't like him, but he's a pretty valuable guy to have. There's so many $4 and $5 million defensemen out there now that if you get a guy who's just slightly under that, you're pretty happy with him. Or if you get a guy right in that wheelhouse, and I think they're happy with the way Quincy plays. So that gets us down to Smith. Again, I think who's the coach? If you tell me who the coach is, then I can tell you about the future of Brendan Smith. I don't think Kindle. I think it's even as a favor, and to be fair to Kindle, you almost have to move him. Certainly, somebody would like a guy who has his mobility and his offensive flair. I remember Patrick Kane telling me that the best player. No, how do you phrase it? The most skilled player he saw when he was playing junior hockey was Jacob Kindle. Like he just said, he was just such a skilled, dominant player at the junior level that I really thought he was going to have high impact. And I think there's still a chance for him. Like I think he's sort of been discouraged in Detroit. I think he's always felt that they didn't like him, and I think he needs just more pats on the back. So they probably owe it to him just to move him and give him an opportunity to play. And I think Marchenko has played himself into the mix. I think Sproul's down there too, and it's interesting. And I say this all the time, but I always have the impression that the hockey world, the pro scouts, like him more than the Red Wings do. It's not they don't like him, but I think in the hockey world, he's usually listed among the top prospects, and we don't hear that much about him from the Red Wings.
Well, when it comes to Jakob Kindle, I'll say I think that depends on who the coach is too. I think that there has been an internal battle within the Red Wing organization between Mike Babcock and everybody else that they want Kindle to play. It has been explained to me on several occasions that they want Kindle to play, but his first mistake, he might as well be banished to, Yellowknife or something, because he's just not going to play, and that is just one of those ongoing things where management and coach kind of butt heads once in a while. So last night I think Henrik Zetterberg, and I think it was a bit calculated, where he said, I thought Jakob Kindl was our best defenseman, because they know that the guy just can't seem to catch a break within the organization. And then when Mike Babcock was asked about that by Trevor Thompson, he didn't say he wasn't. He said that he thought both of them played well. But you know what I mean? I mean, there is an internal struggle. And to get back to Stephen Weiss, again, we've heard that Stephen Weiss, Mike Babcock wanted Stephen Weiss. The Red Wings were still thinking about maybe trying to work out a deal with Valfupua, and it did that. It came down to either one of those guys. So so Babs has his hands in, and a coach should. I'm not saying that he shouldn't. In some of the personnel, or they're playing him. Even though Mike Babcock says they determine the ice time, I think Mike Babcock determines who he likes and who he doesn't. So who he's going to catch a break to and who he's not. Kevin, you said something very interesting, and I really want to get into this, because this seems to be a criticism and a perception of Ken Holland as general manager, that he's kind of lost it. He hasn't pulled off a big deal, a big trade. He hasn't been able to acquire free agents. And Detroit is not a destination place anymore. I mean, if I hear that another time from a Red Wing fan, it'll be like the billionth time that I've heard it. Detroit's not a destination place. Yet, I mean, the last couple of years, they've gotten some free agents and lost out on some of the guys, especially last season and a couple of seasons ago. They're offering money or more money and longer term, and they're not getting them. But is that a perception that Detroit is not a destination place anymore? Or is that people looking at the team, because especially the last couple of seasons, because of the new blood and the young wings, no one knew exactly what Detroit had. And so you look at it now, you see Peter Mrazek in net, a young defensive core maybe, some young forwards. Has that perception changed, or is Detroit not a destination anymore?
Well, I think it's the latter, not the former. I think the whole idea of the change in the stature of the Red Wings has sort of been misrepresented. I mean, I've heard it represented as, well, the building's getting old, nobody wants to come there. Ken Holland isn't a good recruiter anymore. But really what it's been about is the inability for players to read what kind of team the Red Wings were going to be. There was an aging core group. There was guys coming up. How would they merge together? I think all of that has played a huge role, and that's the big issue. Like, the way the salary cap works is all players are going to get their money. Like, everybody knows that. You can actually sort of just figure out where you're going to just look at your stats, and you'll figure out how much money you're going to be offered, because it really is sort of based on stats, and it's almost the way arbitrations are being done. Well, that's what you approach how much money you want in free agency. So it comes down to a quality of life, or in most cases whether you can win, and it's harder than ever to determine which teams have the best chances of winning. In the old days, you could identify at the start of the season what 4 or 5 or 6 teams had a real good shot of winning. It's much harder to do that now. So when you have a difficult read like the Red Wings have been for the last 3 seasons, like, how good are they going to be? It's hard to tell. And I would say they're better now because everybody knows that Nyquist, Tatar, Mrazek, Sheehan, I mean, these are all good players that you can count on, Glendening. But I think it's still, they're not the Rangers. They're not the Tampa Bay Lightning, which are easily identifiable as teams that are really good. This is a team that's still a little bit hard to read. So I think it's still going to be a little bit of a struggle, but the Red Wings still have some good things going for them. They've got, it's well known around the league that Mike Ilitch takes care of his players, that this is a good hockey town. People like playing here. They feel like the media doesn't treat them as harshly or put them under the same level of scrutiny that the Toronto media or the Montreal media would do. So there's a lot to like about it. But I still think it's still a little bit hard of a read to see for players to sort of figure out where exactly the Red Wings are at.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. And when you look at this Detroit roster, it's pretty interesting because except for Joe Pavelski, I think, and Tyler Johnson, most of your goal scorers are top 5, top 10 picks. Red Wings haven't picked there. I mean, is it possible? Because they need a legitimate goal scorer. I mean, they need somebody close to Steven Stamkos or Ovi as they can get. Is it possible to get that player through free agency? Because it looks like where they're drafting, that player isn't there, although Dylan Larkin could have fallen into their laps. I guess because, again, you got to bottom out in order to get those really good players. They've never really bottomed out, so they're still a good hockey team, but they're not an elite hockey team, and unless you're elite, chances are you're not going to win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, well, if I can just sound like a caller to a radio show, you stole my thunder, because they do have a top 5 pick. His name is Dylan Larkin, only they got him 15th.
Right.
Yeah, in any other year, he would have, or now that everybody has seen him, he's progressed to the point that I think if you redrafted, he would be in the top 5. So they do have that guy. But, basically you're asking me a question that could be the basis for a week's worth of shows. And that is just the long argued and no solution ever found question of whether or not it just makes sense to bottom out so you can get those early picks and get those premium players, because it is hard now, particularly the way that NHL free agency has evolved. Like, everybody re-signs their own players now. There's very few premium players available in the marketplace, so it's hard to get. Initially, when before the lockout, actually, or during the lockout, there was a lot of discussion about, hey, when the salary cap comes in, we'll be changing players all the time. They'll walk and they'll go into the free agent marketplace. There'll be 100 players every summer. We'll change players. That hasn't happened. Players, general managers identify their premium players. They get them locked up. And now there's just very few players, and those players get paid for what they, probably more than their statistics say they're worth. So it hasn't worked that way. So it'll be interesting to see. The Red Wings are kind of a good test case. Can you maintain a high level of competitiveness without ever, over a 20-year span, getting an early draft pick? I think Dylan Larkin and Mantha are both players who I think people believe are are probably more talented than their draft status suggests. So it'll be interesting to see whether those two will be enough to sort of dig them out of that little dilemma, because it's hard to trade for those guys. Nobody's trading you Ovechkin or Stamkos or Crosby, or I found it interesting. There was a lot. I even wrote it too about would the Penguins consider trading Malkin because things haven't gone well. Well, they came right out within 24 hours of being ousted in the playoffs, saying we're not breaking up the 1-2 center combination.
Right.
So I mean, Sergei Fedorov getting dealt, those kind of things just rarely happen. When obviously the Red Wings, made a move and so forth back in the day, but that doesn't happen very often.
Kevin, let's we only have a few minutes here left because I know you're in demand today, and you should be. So I'm going to ask you a goaltending question, and then we'll move on to Mike Babcock's future, and then we will say sayonara for this edition. And then speculation is the Red Wings will have what I call exit day, when they take their team picture and clean out their lockers, will be Friday at noontime. But that's not scheduled yet. So once they start talking, I talked to Ken Holland this morning, and he told me that he's not really going to say too much. He wants to talk to the players and have meetings with them first. He might talk to the media a little bit on Friday, but I think as the weekend progresses, we'll get maybe kind of an idea of what they're thinking. Although that could change on a fly during the offseason, as we very well know. But next year, who are the two goalies on the Detroit roster? Is there a goaltending battle between Mrazek and Howard? Do the Red Wings owe Howard that, or do they look at it and say we can't afford to have a backup goalie named Jimmy Howard making the money that he's making? We're going to have to try to move him.
Well, there's less pressure to trade Howard because Mrazek doesn't make a lot of money. So, I mean, I guess the odds would say, because it is hard to move a goalie. I mean, it really is. And I mentioned some, but if Murray doesn't like Howard, really, what are the chances of moving him?
How about Edmonton, or is that out of the question?
I mean, that's possible, but again, I don't know how Peter Chiarelli, feels about. I mean, that's a possibility, but I think the point I'm just trying to make is there's not 10 teams looking for goalies.
Right.
It's going to be like 3 teams. So I would bet that it would be Mrazek and Howard, but. Who knows? I would think they're going to explore what their options are, for sure.
Right. I am just wondering, and I don't know this, and maybe he doesn't even know that, if Mrazek beats him out, and he actually beat him out for the playoffs, how is Jimmy Howard going to react to that? I mean, that has got to be, I would imagine, even though, look, they're making a lot of money, ladies and gentlemen, and I know that. And everyone thinks that, as soon as they get their paycheck or it's direct deposited and they look at their bank account, suddenly they don't feel so bad. But they want to win. They want to play. They're competitive. They're professional athletes for a reason, and part of that reason is that they want to play. So, I mean, I think that is a real delicate balancing act, because until it actually happens, when you have both of them in the room, and you have a guy who's 23 about to be 24 and a guy who's about to be 31 or 32, whatever Jimmy will be, that could actually not be a good scenario as far as dynamics in the room, though. But I guess we just don't know. I'm not saying that Jimmy isn't a pro or Mrazek. I think they would try to handle it the best, but I think after a while that would have to eat away at Jimmy.
Yes, but I think Howard is also a smart fella, and he's going to understand that it's not like there are a lot of options. Like, goalies understand that there's only 60 spots for them in the NHL. Like,
right.
If you got one of those spots and you're making $5 million, you're thankful you're there. It's nice. It's nice to think, well, I can utilize some leverage and get out of here, but easier said than done. I mean, that's why goalies also hate to go into the free agent marketplace, because they don't know what teams are going to be looking for goalies at that time. So I think Howard will be reasonable about this. He's got to understand Mrazek played well. I mean, he may not have liked the circumstances of it, but I guarantee you he understands how it all works. Like, he wasn't playing well. Mrazek struggled a little bit, but probably showed more than Howard. And then when he got rolling, Howard's smart enough to know that they weren't going to switch from Mrazek, and so now he knows, he is. And it's not like he didn't know Mrazek was a quality goalie. I mean, these guys know. He knew that this was a possibility. He probably knew it when he signed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Mrazek has been on the radar. I don't want to keep going back to my Chris Osgood story 4 years ago, but Mrazek's been on my radar since Ozzy told me about him. But let's look now at Mike Babcock. A couple of things, and I know we're up against it. And once Babcock talks, he said last night at his post-game press conference, I'll talk about that crap I think he used and all that stuff on what I call exit day. So we would imagine tomorrow, and we'll do another show either over the weekend or on Monday to talk about what had transpired on exit day and more speculation, because that's what we love. But with that said, he said one thing that Darren Elliott pointed out he said that Mrazek is going to be good for a long time or be part of the Wings. He called them the Wings. He didn't say us. And he thought, and Darren Elliott said, that might be, a telltale sign. And then Chris Osgood said that he doesn't think Mike Babcock's coming back, but he's earned the right to go out and explore. I think you and I have been consistent on this. We thought that he was going to take it to term, so to speak, see what's out there, but that eventually he would come back to Detroit. I really haven't changed that, although the way that they exited this year, and again, not advancing past the second round since 2009, and granted, there was a lot of transition that went on in this period too. But what do you think what's your gut tell you? What's going to happen? I mean, now, and I figured, at the end of the season I would get this way anyway. I guess I'm kind of unsure again. I can see it going either way, and I'm not trying to cop out here.
Well, what's interesting is I think the one thing that none of us anticipated is the coaching landscape, and that is, who would have guessed that there would be this many openings? There are a lot of teams looking for coaches, and all of them have some fascinating draw. The Edmonton Oilers, Connor McDavid.
Right.
The Maple Leafs that may just print you $10 million a year in their basement, and then you make you the highest paid coach. I mean, nothing's out of the realm of possibility in Toronto if you're willing to put up with the messiness that is being coach in Toronto. The Buffalo Sabres have Jack Eichel and a lot of great young players, and they have and I looked it up yesterday, they have an owner worth $3.8 billion who now owns the Buffalo Bills. You can't exclude Pagula from anything. He's a big time operator. I don't care about that Buffalo's a small city. He's a big time operator. Because getting the Bills was no small feat. He's worth a lot of money. The New York Islanders are an intriguing team. They've got Tavares, who Babcock knows a lot about. It's like getting another, Crosby. They've got Johnny Boychuk. The Flyers have, it's another Mike Ilitch type situation. Ed Snyder, very active owner, willing to do whatever it takes to be successful now. Claude Giroux is there. He doesn't have a goalie, but he can probably find one. It's probably what he's thinking. So there are a lot of good options for him, and I think Ozzy's right on the money on this. He's earned that right. Players, they get to free agency, they get to look around. Coaches have not done that in the past, but Babcock's been very successful, and I think the Red Wings. I'm sure the Ilitches would like to keep him. He's been very successful, but I also think that you have to pay homage to the fact that I do think Mike Babcock likes it in Detroit. I think he likes running along the Detroit River every day at 11 o'clock. I think he liked the fact that his family, essentially raised here. He's treated well here. This is a great hockey environment. The Ilitches are great to work for. Kenny Holland is one of the top general managers in the league. The team's pretty darn good. These younger players don't seem to be quite as set in their ways of rebelling against them as maybe the older guys were. I mean, there's just a lot of factors here. So, I don't know what my gut feelings is. I will say that I was in Nashville and I was having lunch with a league official, and I bet $1 that he was going to Mike Babcock was going to stay, and that the other guy bet he was going to go to Toronto. It's possible both of us will be wrong.
Yeah, well, we'll see. All right, Kevin, on that note, this will conclude this episode of the Red and White Authority, episode 22. If the Red Wings have exit day tomorrow, and if they don't, I don't think it would be till Monday. So if they do have exit day, perhaps maybe Sunday we should do another one, do you think?
Yeah, yeah, that'll be good. Sunday would be good.
Okay, we'll do it on Sunday. I don't know what your travel schedule's like, and we'll get into the other playoff series and speculation on the Red Wings. But great job as always, Kevin, and that will do it, as I said, for this edition of the Red and White Authority, episode 22. Until we meet again for episode 23, have a safe and pleasant one, everyone. Enjoy all the hockey. For Kevin Allen, I'm Art Regner. Take care. We'll see you. Bye-bye.